Seguidamente, la Asamblea
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Abdel-Fattah Al-Burhan Abdelrahman Al-Burhan, President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
In the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate. Mr. President, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you. I speak before you today on behalf of the people and the government of Sudan. I would like to congratulate the President of this 79th session of the General Assembly and his team. We wish you every success, especially in the face of various threats to peace and security, threats which endanger our organization and which undermine freedom, peace, and justice, leading to the violation of the law. Sudan stands convinced of the important role played by the United Nations. We support all initiatives geared towards reforming the organization and its bodies, specifically the Security Council, with a view to enshrining pluralism, collective security, and upholding human rights, all the while tackling the challenges of climate change and ethnically and ideologically motivated terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, Sudan commends the choice of theme for this topic, for this session, Unity and Diversity for the Advancement of Peace, Sustainable Development and Human Dignity. We welcome the priorities set by the President of this 79th session. Furthermore, it's important to implement the outcomes of the Summit of the Future, especially as regards United Nations reform and Security Council reform, so that these bodies can put an end to the protracted crises threatening international peace, as well as to achieve consensus and harmony in the relations between states and peoples. Unilateral measures taken outside the United Nations framework in complete violation of the UN Charter and international law, political and economic restrictions, these are the main drivers of instability, especially as regards security, the economy, and also on the political front. All of this fuels war. However, I must also add that double standards and selectiveness are currently prevailing in international affairs. There can be no doubt about it. Sudan is facing very serious challenges. And in fact, a war is being waged. There's a conspiracy. A war is being waged by a group that has rebelled against the state for many years. It's receiving political and logistical support at the local and regional levels. You've all witnessed the crimes, the violations, and the atrocities committed by these rebels, targeting the Sudanese people and the Sudanese state. The war began with an attempt to seize power through force. With time, it's transformed into a total war against the Sudanese state and the Sudanese people. Countless crimes have been committed: ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and genocide. All of this has been committed by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which should be considered a terrorist group. This militia is continuing to perpetrate crimes, and it is most unfortunate that it is receiving the support of some states in the region. States which are providing funding and mercenaries for their own political and economic benefit, in flagrant violation of law and international will. Mr. President, these terrorist groups have also hit diplomatic missions, other organizations, and property. They have not spared the UN. And in fact, UN headquarters, the UN office in Sudan, has been targeted. The Dagalo family has been violating all laws and all international obligations with impunity. The family refuses to comply with the Jeddah Declaration and rejects UN Security Council resolutions regarding the arms embargo imposed on Darfur. Thus, ethnic cleansing crimes are continuing. Most recently, we also recorded a violation of the resolution on El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur State. This begs the question, why has the international system not taken any firm or dissuasive measures vis-à-vis this group and those who support it? Despite everything that's been done, all the crimes we witnessed, crimes against humanity, war crimes, despite their refusal to implement Security Council resolutions and decisions adopted by regional organizations, all the more reason to call for Security Council reform to avoid this policy of impunity and double standards becoming key characteristics of this organization. Ladies and gentlemen, this devastating aggression being waged by the RSF with the support of states in the region providing funding and mercenaries as well as weapons to the RSF have resulted in deaths of dozens of thousands of Sudanese and the displacement of many millions more. Sudanese people have been forced to leave their lands, their motherland, to evade these armed groups. They've taken refuge in various regions. Millions more Sudanese are living in peace today in other parts of the country. Systematic attacks committed by the militia are contributing to the suffering of our compatriots. As a result, we've been seeking a peaceful solution to the situation, and the Jeddah Declaration, dated May 2023, should have been enough to put an end to this war. And yet, regional political players who are in favor of the war have a different take on the situation. This has resulted in the situation we have on our hands today. As a result, so as to alleviate the suffering of our fellow Sudanese and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, we've opened our borders and airports. We've lifted all impediments to this aid being delivered. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Sudanese government is steadfastly committed to facilitating humanitarian assistance, protecting humanitarian convoys and personnel, as well as medical personnel. We fully uphold international humanitarian law and measures geared towards the protection of civilians. The protection of civilians is our responsibility, especially when women and children are being hit the hardest by violations committed in areas controlled by the militias. Some women and children have even been sold in marketplaces. The humanitarian crisis affecting a large majority of our population, owing to the aggression being waged by the Dagala militia, require us to act in concert with one another. It's necessary to provide assistance to millions of displaced persons and refugees. On our side, we're doing everything within our power so as to ensure that aid is delivered to those who need it most. We would like to thank all neighboring states who've welcomed displaced persons and refugees. We thank organizations providing assistance to the Sudanese people as well. President, we face a very tall challenge. This organization must shoulder its responsibility, specifically so as to protect developing countries in the face of the avarice of some other states who would like to control our people's riches through the use of force, and specifically through the use of money. We hope that the will of our people will prevail. Numerous crises, including the one underway in Sudan, are the product of a policy of double standards, as well as political approaches based on exerting power, economic blackmail, and the fact that the organization has not managed to deter those who defy the will of their people and of nations, threatening international peace and security. Mr. President, today we have a marketplace of initiatives. Some of these initiatives serve narrow interests, and the corrosive effects of this are patently obvious. In our countries, artificial conflicts are growing in number. For this reason, we need national ownership, this particular principle, and that's why since the start of the crisis, we've done everything we could to put an end to this war and to spare our country from the destruction being waged by the Dagalo militia, attacking the Sudanese people. Thus, we contributed to various constructive initiatives, and we still harbor hopes of ending this conflict so as to guarantee the dignity of the Sudanese people and the sovereignty of our state. We are hoping to ensure that the conflict will not be resumed and conflicts will end. The path towards an end to this conflict is clear in our view. First and foremost, we need to put an end to the hostilities. The militias must withdraw from all of the areas they currently occupy and from which people have been displaced. They must lay down their weapons so that people can go back to their homes and so that assistance can be delivered. This will also facilitate the reopening of roads, airports, and the resumption of production. Second, this end to hostilities must be accompanied with a comprehensive political process so that we can see through the political transition, avoiding the resumption of war and potential coups d'etats. Mr. President, the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, is one of the state's oldest institutions. It's non-politicized. It's very much in favor of a democratic transition, and it's committed to the right of the Sudanese people to pick its leadership. This is why the SAF is upholding the commitments undertaken as part of the glorious 2019 revolution, so that a consensus government, an elected government, can accede to power. We will never accept a return to the previous regime, which was rejected by the Sudanese people. Thus, we are very much committed to facilitating the transition process, moving towards a civilian government. We will continue pursuing peace, working with all groups who have laid down their weapons, as well as with groups who still carry weapons but who are willing to respect the Juba Peace Agreement signed in 2020. Throughout this war, the Sudanese Armed Forces have done everything they possibly could, continuing to uphold international humanitarian law as well as the Geneva Conventions and Protocols thereto, working to protect civilians and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. We stand ready to partake in all initiatives that can help to put an end to this war. As soon as we have an initiative that would respect the principle of national ownership and will put an end to the control and occupation of our territory by this rebel militia. We are also in favor of all initiatives which will protect civilians and guarantee the dignity of our people. These are the prerequisites for a return to democracy. It's unacceptable for a government as well as for the Sudanese people to partake in these, to see organizations who've supported the war, states who've supported the war and massacres of Sudanese partaking in such initiatives. Some of these organizations and states have allowed weapons to be funneled through their territory to the militias, and they've also provided political support to these rebel groups. We must therefore continue acting to convince the aggressors that they shouldn't be receiving this assistance. Mr. President, I'd like to thank all of the states as well as the organizations and various human rights defense groups, as well as civil society organizations, all those who've tried to paint a true, accurate picture of what is happening in Sudan. I welcome the outcome of the Summit, the Great Lakes Summit in Rwanda, and the meeting that took place in Yaoundé. There, at all of these meetings, the RSF were described as a rebel group working against the state. We've managed to circumscribe the activities of this group and deter them. Hopefully, we'll be able to deter them from acting in a similar fashion in other countries. The RSF should be called should be called out for what they are. They've rebelled against the state. They're committing terrorist crimes and should be considered as such here at the United Nations. Mr. President, before I conclude, I'd like to reassert our position vis-à-vis the issue of Palestine and the right of the Palestinian people to establish an independent state within 1967 borders. It's necessary to put an immediate end to the aggression being waged in Gaza and in Lebanon. We also call for Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations. By way of conclusion, we'd like to extend our gratitude to all those who've supported us through these testing times. Millions of Sudanese still need your help. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to reiterate that the will of the Sudanese people will prevail. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Transitional Sovereign Council of the Republic of the Sudan.